I first heard about HIV and AIDS with a small little article in The Advocate. The Advocate was a local, national throwaway paper back then. The only way we got information is as you were leaving the bar, you would grab Frontiers, lesbian news, even if you weren't a lesbian, just because it had information. Edge, Advocate, you'd grab all these, throwaway rags, we would call them, but throwaway magazines, so you'd take them home and read about what was happening. And there was a little blurb in The Advocate about a strange cancer that was starting to happen. It really hit home in June of '85. June of '85 is when I lost my first friend to AIDS. So it was my friend Scott Fleener. We went on a trip out of town and we came back and there were like 30 messages on our machine. And we're like, what's going on? That's odd. So we hit play and it was Scott and he's like, hey guys, it's Scott and I'm at Hoag Hospital here in Newport and they say I have pneumonia and I'd just seen Scott like the week before and I'm getting really sick and I'm afraid of what it could be. Can you guys call me? Beep, next message. Hey guys, it's Scott. I'm in room 503 here at Hoag. When you get in, give me a call because I think it's pneumonia and I'm thinking I'm getting that thing that everyone seems to be getting. Give me a call, Beep. Guys, it's Scott. Why aren't you calling me back? Why are you afraid? Are you afraid if you come visit me, you're going to get it? What's wrong with you guys? We've been friends for years. Give me a call. Give me a call. Beep. Fuck you guys. I can't believe you're not calling me back. What are you so afraid of? You're not going to get it from me. I need you to come see me. Beep. Messages went on, and finally the last message was his best friend, Deborah, Sunshine, saying, beep, hi guys, we lost Scotty. I went to Scotty's Catholic Memorial out in Fontana, that's where he was from, and of course the parents didn't mention that he was gay. Like all of his gay friends and Sunshine, who was his big lesbian friend, none of us were even identified as family, and it was a very Catholic service, and they didn't talk about anything that mattered to his life. And I'm like, this is indecent. So, at his burial site, I said, I'm going to get involved. I don't know what that means. I'm a law student, right? I'm stopping work at Disneyland. I'm graduating from law school. I need to get involved. And then somebody said, hey, look at this article. Lyndon LaRouche is creating an initiative for the California ballot next year to put all HIV positive people in camps, concentration camps. And it was like, what? How can that be? And that was Proposition 64. And that was, for me, and I think so many people, the galvanizing moment to get involved. So the polls showed initially it was going to pass in California by 2-1. It was going to pass. And so I walked into the No on Proposition 64 headquarters and said, hi, my name's John Duran. I'm a law student. I'm here to help. And they said, great, you're in charge of communications. I'm like, in charge? I said, I'm 25 years old. What do you mean I'm in charge? There ain't nobody else here but you. You're in charge of communications. And so there I was, a 25-year-old law student, not really sure of myself or where we were heading, but like so many others, I think so many others were galvanized because of the death and dying of friends and fear, not only for our friends but ourselves as well. We started raising money, and sure enough, we raised over $1 million, to fight Prop 64, which at that time was like unbelievable that we, the little, queers from Santa Monica Boulevard and the Castro, could raise that kind of money, but we did. And then we went to battle, and the CMA, the California Medical Association, California nurses, the health officers, most of the Democrats, not all, but most of the Democrats were with us. Moderate Republicans were with us, is when we had moderate Republicans in California, and we turned the clock, and then Prop 64 went down to defeat 2-1. But it wasn't the end of it, because after Prop 64, it came Prop 69, Prop 96, Prop 102. It became 3 more AIDS initiatives 2 years later. It forced us into opposing camps, and it was a dividing rod. And on one side were the gay guys who said, we need to shut the bathhouses down, we need to shut the sex clubs down, we need to stop, having sex until we figure this out. It's just got to stop. And the other camp that I was part of was like, no, we didn't fight this hard to come out and to be part of a sexual revolution and to live full and healthy lives to suddenly be told to stop having sex. So we need to figure out how instead to have safer sex. At the beginning, it was really rough to get funding, and we had to create our own institutions. And I will tell you, looking back now, and I have the benefit of looking back, 40 years, almost 50 years, so what happened in the 80s. The center, the Gay and Lesbian Center, was that one room on Highland with 3 phones, right? I mean, and there were other centers like that in San Francisco and Orange County, and our institutions had not yet established any roots. I mean, we were just sort of, fly-by-night operations in mini-mart locations, wherever you could tuck in a center. And suddenly we had an epidemic on our hands, and we had to start to organize. And a lot of gay men who had resources and privilege and wealth, like, they knew that this was going to be it. They had a life expectancy of 1 to 7 years, maybe 10 at the most. And they started to give away their money, and in these foundations left bequests into what would become AIDS Project Los Angeles and the San Francisco AIDS Foundation and the Orange County AIDS Foundation. And so suddenly a lot of gay men who had only been consumed with the next great vacation or my designer clothes or my beautiful nightlife and lifestyle were suddenly finding themselves in a charitable gift of generosity and giving away to preserve the legacy of what we had created and to ensure that we'd have a future. Thank God for Henry Waxman, who was the member of Congress for West Los Angeles and West Hollywood. Henry was part of the Berman-Waxman machine and a very powerful member of Congress. And we were very fortunate in California also that the head of the California Assembly was Willie Brown, who represented San Francisco, and David Roberti, head of the state Senate, who represented Hollywood. So we had these very powerful allies in very powerful places that were just trying to keep constituents happy. But we had to, organize ourselves to begin to lobby, to even ask for these contributions. So one of the first organizations we created, the Life AIDS Lobby, that was in response to the defeat of Prop 64 in '86. We beat Lyndon LaRouche at the ballot. Within 3 months, in 1987, 142 bills were introduced in Sacramento on HIV and AIDS, from the most progressive to the most onerous. And we're like, oh my God, we just spent $1 million organizing for 18 months to beat this horrible thing, and now it's back in like 3 dozen different forms. This is not sustainable. We need to create a lobby. So we created the Life AIDS Lobby. AIDS Project Los Angeles is one of the founding members of that lobby. The city of West Hollywood, also a founding member of that lobby. And we pulled together until we reached the point where in the late 80s, we had 104 organizations from across California all sitting at a common table. I was the co-chair of the board, so I had to run a meeting with 104 people sitting there hashing out policy and funding requests and hospice regulations. And our meetings would take 3 days because we had 7 chapters of ACT UP, 5 members of the Log Cabin Clubs, all the AIDS foundations, all the gay and lesbian centers. Everybody had a common table, and we had to fight it out so that we could go to the leadership in Sacramento and Washington and say, the following 104 organizations support this. We had dentists who wouldn't clean teeth, morticians who wouldn't bury bodies, restaurants who wouldn't serve people, nail salons that wouldn't trim nails, people losing their jobs. And then if you lost your job, you lost your health insurance when you needed it most, disability and life insurance companies canceling policies, people getting evicted from apartments. We had to fight just to get basic HIV education in the high schools. They didn't want kids to know. And they're like, well, kids shouldn't be having sex in high school. It's like, okay, were you in high school ever? Do you recall what you did in the back seat with the steamy windows? I mean, they're going to do it. Let's arm them with information. Active LA came together after the March on Washington. And of course, a lot of the guys who created that, Mark Kostopoulos and Wade Brown, Dave Johnson, they're all gone now. We lost them in the epidemic, but it was quite a feat to watch them come back. And we had a very AIDS-phobic Board of Supervisors back then. The LA County Board of Supervisors were not supportive like they are today. It was a Republican majority. They were hostile. And so the whole idea of, county hospitals or county funding was like an anathema to them. They didn't want any part of it. And meanwhile, we're losing thousands of people here in Los Angeles County. And the county has responsibility for the health department. So that's where ACT UP showed up, at the county hospitals, at the county board of supervisors, made it really uncomfortable, started showing up where they were eating, demonstrating wherever they want. And so ACT UP would scream in their faces, and then the suits would walk in after from MECLA, Municipal Elections Committee of Los Angeles, which was Diane Abbott and David Mixner's group, and they would walk in and say, if you just dedicate some money here to funding the Gay and Lesbian Center or AIDS Project Los Angeles or testing or treatment or education, these people will go away. And so it was a great 1-2. The primary issue for ACT UP was issues around treatment. Like people were dying horrific, horrible deaths alone. And back then, I know this because I was on it, AZT was the only drug available, and I was on AZT for a very short period of time. It's a horrible drug. I mean, it killed the virus and it killed the patient at the same time. You know, all of my hair fell out, my nails fell off. You know, it was a horrible, toxic drug that was meant to kill virus and host. So AZT was not going to be sufficient. So we needed more research and more drugs. Back then, the FDA and the way in which drugs were approved was very time consuming. Like first they'd have to prove that it was not toxic. And then after years of testing whether or not it was toxic, then they would move into efficacy, whether it's effective. And then finally after that, they'd start to do human trials, clinical trials. Well, from origination to clinical trials could take 5 to 7 years, and you've only got 5 years left. It's like, no, this isn't going to work. You need to parallel track them. And this was brand new to drug approval in this country, meaning, all right, prove it's not going to kill us, it's not toxic, but then do efficacy and double-blind studies and randomized sampling and clinical trials at the same time. And then after a while, if it's starting to prove effective, the people that are on placebo and don't know it, give them the drug. Like none of this would have ever been thought of, and it's happening today with COVID. But the whole idea of patients demanding, you know, access to a drug immediately, willing to risk their own lives, put their bodies at risk to test the efficacy of a drug, in exchange for the government promising after some limited experimentation, if this is working, give the people on placebo the same drug, move to the next stage. And suddenly we moved drug approval into a matter of years, 2 or 3 years instead of 7. When I discovered I was HIV positive, I did the quick math. So 94, 7 to 10 years, I'll be dead. So I asked my doctor, Dr. Scott Hitt, I said, so what are the odds of me seeing the new millennium in 2000? He said, probably not going to happen. So get your affairs in order. So I went to Russia, and I went to China, and I toured South America. I got to see parts of the world I never got to see, and I went skydiving, and I did all the things I never thought I'd get to do, you know, while still being an activist. And then, you know, protease hit, and suddenly I was getting better. And I was using new drugs, and I was in a study at first, clinical, and once they were found to be effective, you know, took me off the placebo and gave me the real drug, and now I'm getting better and pulling it back together. And then, you know, and year 2000 hit, and I'm still alive. I get to see the new millennium, and then 2001, people in West Hollywood are like, you should run for council. You should join the West Hollywood City Council. You had a great story on, you know, what's been happening. So I did, and then served on the council for 20 years. I lost my best friend, my roommate, 2 of my law partners, people I loved and cherished deeply. Still hurts to talk about 40 years later. I wish they were all still here. But given what we all went through and watching the heroism and the bravery and the courage of not only those that we lost, but those that survived, who are living and walking examples of PTSD, like the gay men and lesbians and trans people that watched all this, that were still walking around, they got some serious mental hang-ups. You know, that's what happens when you watch all your dearest ones perish, and horrible deaths, right? So we're still here, and we're still fighting. We wouldn't have like gay electeds in position of power as a U.S. Senator like Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, you know, members of Congress or the California Supreme Court, openly gay people, had we not paid that price through HIV and AIDS. Like we paid the price at the altar for equality.